Hello, everyone. Welcome to Listening to Lancaster. I'm Diana Martin with Hourglass, and it's my pleasure to be joined today by Will Kiefer, founder and executive director of the Benchmark program. Thanks so much for joining me, Will.
Very happy to be here, Diana. Thanks for having me, and it's great to be with you and all of the listeners at Hourglass Lancaster.
So, you must be at the Benchmark program. I can see the very colorful mural behind you. Uh,
Yes,
Give people an overview of Benchmark and your mission, especially if they're not familiar yet with your organization.
sure. So I'll give two iterations. First is the scripted and then the unscripted. So the scripted benchmark is that we are a fitness-based mentoring program. Now, the modality that we use is very long-term. So we connect with kids when they are incarcerated and they are in the Youth Intervention Center, and we have a series of programs that allow them to stay connected to our organization and our mentors the entire way through their juvenile justice journey, and if they're involved with children and youth through their dependency journey, so that no matter what's going on for those critical years of development, adolescence, these kids have a place, they have a resource, they have people they can keep coming back to. So that's a very scripted benchmark. The description, the unscripted version is that for many of us, we have a space, whether it be a gym or another group that you go to, that people know you, they see you, you don't have any contract with them, but they're curious about your life. And when you walk in the door, someone remembers something about you. They remember something that you're working on or something you did there previously. And they see you and they check in with you and they ask you when you're going to come back. And that doesn't replace your family, but that's a place that feels like family. And that in your life, that connection, that place, those people, those check-ins is a bulwark against so many waves that crash over your life. So that's what the benchmark is to us. It's that spot that you can always come back to. It's those people who know you. It's those people who are checking in on you. That's who we are.
And how many youth are you serving in your programs?
So, I mean, a year and a half ago, we would say that we would serve about 50 individuals a week across a series of programs. At that time, it was 3. Today, in March of 2024, we have 7 separate programs operating in different locations at different times, now serving consistently, averaging over 100 kids a day. So that may be 101, 102, but we've just breached that 100 student a day average for different reasons and different programs, but connecting with 100 young people every day.
That's a lot of growth. Is some of that because of, I know you guys recently moved to a new building downtown. So can you talk a little bit about that development and how that's helped you serve the kids in your program?
Yes. So really through a lot of generous partners, including the Steinman Foundation and this property, we have been able to create a space that kids want to come to. And there are ways that young people access Benchmark because they are referred, because they have to be here. But there are many students who just seek this place out because it's fun and there's positive energy here. So the building itself has allowed us to grow new programs, and not just the fitness pieces, but academic pieces, and now critically some workforce development pieces. Also, this building has 2 floors. So we have historically struggled to serve young women. And probably because when they walk into this gym space, they see a bunch of boys and think, well, this place isn't for me. So we've taken the whole 2nd floor of this new building and have created what we call the Women's Strength and Fitness Center. In case there are young women who show up here and want a separate space, they want separate equipment. We have a big group exercise area up there, along with strength equipment and a lounge area. So just creating the capacity for more kids. Also, we're right downtown. We're at the intersection of Prince and Vine and Water. So we learned through our partners at the School District of Lancaster that really 60% of SDOL's student population is within a 10-minute walk of this building. So you can imagine the foot traffic that brings in.
Well, that's a really exciting development. And I have another thing to congratulate you on. I saw that you recently received an ARPA grant totaling over $300,000 from Lancaster County government for workforce development. Tell me a little bit more about your plans for those grant funds.
Well, first of all, thanks for asking, Diana. This is something that we've been working on, and really that we put out there in July of 2023. I have to rewind, though, to say that 2 years ago, the initiative that is now being funded by ARPA was actually started with a grant from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. So we decided that in our what we call the wraparound service model, there was one part missing. So there was a piece that we couldn't connect with our students in their juvenile justice journey, and that was the period of time right after their release from the detention center before they've had their formal dispositional hearing. And at that point, we as a community and the judge have decided to release the individual from detention, but they need some service in place to make sure that they don't get into trouble again before they're referred to the traditional benchmark mentoring programs. So we applied for the state grant from the PA Commission on Crime and Delinquency. We said we want to fill that period of time. We want to do it hyper local, hyper focused. So we want mentors from this community to provide a one-on-one relationship with those kids right after they get out. We piloted that program in 2021 and 2022. We worked very collaboratively with the Department of Juvenile Probation here to run that program. It went well. And we said at this point, that program has to continue. We worked, again, this is all a collaboration with the County of Lancaster and the Department of Juvenile Probation. And they said, well, there's this resource through ARPA dollars that funds workforce development. And we said, wow, part of the strategy to keeping highly at-risk young people from reoffending is to occupy their time, both with a mentor and with employment. We're doing that work. Let's expand that work. So at the time, we were serving 4 individuals. So only had a capacity to take 4 kids out of the detention center and mentor them here in the community, keep them out of trouble. We wrote to the commissioners and said, we could, with this ARPA support, expand that program to serve 8 individuals at a time. Now, think about the cost savings to the county from removing those individuals from detention and putting them in a very tailored one-on-one mentoring relationship here with their families and in the community. That was an easy investment. So those ARPA dollars will serve 8 kids a day that otherwise the county would have been expensing for their time in detention. They're here with us now. They have a one-on-one mentor. And when they have their dispositional hearing, that same mentor can stick with them here at Benchmark. So it's a very powerful, it's good for us because we're expanding kind of the workforce development pieces of that program, but it's also good for the kids because now they don't have to be sent to some other program. They can stay here with us. So that's the value. And the neat thing is now that those ARPA dollars are in place and we'll do that expansion within the next year, really within the next couple months, the county is considering, we look at the metrics, we look at the outcomes from that. Could this program be incorporated into the county budget for future years as well? So ARPA dollars have allowed us to do all that.
Well, that's exciting and something we'll have to keep up with as it evolves. So far, we've been kind of talking about the number of youth that you serve, but of course, your program is more than about numbers. These are about real people. And I was hoping maybe you could share a story of the type of youth that you are serving. What are their backgrounds? How are they ending up with you? And how are they benefiting from the programs that you have at Benchmark?
Yep. So I think the best way to articulate it is just to tell the stories of one of our students. And his name is Julius. And he had an issue in York County, actually. And it was a gun-related issue that caused him to become incarcerated there. He was actually moved from adult prison in York over here to Lancaster County Youth Intervention Center, where we began to work with him. Now, we have some programming in the detention center, leadership development, get to know you kind of programming. So we connected with him there, and we found out that he was eligible for release. So he was able really on a daily basis to be released to our program so that we could really get him into what we call the strength-based mentoring program here. And that went well. And he continued through that. In fact, breezed through it very quickly. After he completed that program, we said, well, you've built this relationship with us. You're succeeding, is accomplishing all of the things he had to do that pertained to his charges. We said, why don't you come to our open gym program at night? And he willingly came. He participated in the bigger kind of community program. And then we noticed that he was starting to kind of do some of the things that we were doing around here, helping students, cleaning the gym, asking out for ways he can help. So we said, well, let's just give you a part-time job here. Why don't you work for us? We'll help you get through the remaining parts of this probation stuff, and you'll have a part-time job. We'll build your resume, and that's what we've done. So Julius has since moved out of the detention center. Now he's in a group home, doing very well, living independently, coming to Benchmark every day. On top of the Benchmark stuff, he's decided to join the Blue Rock Volunteer Fire Company in Millersville. So he's running with the fire trucks now, working on his certifications. I mean, I don't know what kind of kids volunteer like that at 18 years old, but he does. And now with us, he's got a very strong resume. So we're currently in the process of shopping his resume around to local employers who would let him keep this life schedule. Work in the morning, come to Benchmark in the evening, do some volunteer fire company work. And Julius has been through all those programs. And at this point, it's taken years, but that's the value of Benchmark, that he didn't just come to our program for 6 months. He knew I'm going to be able to stick with these people for years. And I think that's what's driven positive outcomes for him. Many kids come to us that way. They come through a referral, but they stay because they're connected, and that's valuable to them.
A lot of the folks that are coming into your program, these are teenagers. How young are some of the um, individuals that you're working with?
So over time, we've pushed the age down. So we've been welcoming because families come to us often and ask us to help, and we're happy to do it. So now we take individuals as young as 13, and we will serve them up until 24 years old.
Okay.
So in that time window, think about all the life changes that occur. So the value of having some mentors through all that is there. But for different kids coming in at different times, they have totally different needs. And we do say this is interesting. We have no graduation at Benchmark. You don't graduate, you're not done. You may finish individual programs, but you're never moved out of this space. The kids who we serve do that naturally. They do things that fill their time, that are positive, that we support, that make it so that they can't come here every day anymore. And so we'll celebrate that, but we never say to kids, all right, it's been great to know you. We'll see you later. That's not a message we send here.
You gave the example of Julius, and you said that he was involved with something with a gun related crime. And this is something we're hearing more about at Hourglass. We host a lot of forums. We've had forums with the mayor, with the police chief, and we're hearing about this rise in really juvenile gun crime in our community. What are you seeing as the root cause of this trend, and how can we start to tackle it as a community?
This is what causes us to lose sleep at night. This is what causes us here at our facility to have a very heightened security setup because we are concerned about gun violence. We're not concerned about it within our facility. We're concerned about young people targeting other young people who come here. That said, there are three main things that we've noticed, some of which Benchmark can work on, some of which we can't. Number one is access. Never before have firearms been so accessible. And I'm not just talking about the ones you can build. That does happen, but I'm talking about knowing someone who knows someone who can get you one for a relatively affordable price relatively quickly. Access. Number two, social media. If someone threatens someone else on social media and brandishes a gun, that person feels like they need, number three, protection. So we have this loop that we're stuck in of easy access, social media, which perpetuates this very I'm going to get you culture. I'm stronger than you. You're weak. You're weak if you don't respond. And kids responding by, well, I need one too, because I'm not sure when someone could roll down my block and shoot me without even knowing it, or shoot into my house, or shoot my family. It's very hard as an organization to try and convince a young person that they should put down the gun because it's not something they should do. It's a bad thing. It's very dangerous, because they'll respond to you every time and say, Mister, I know it's dangerous and I wish I didn't have to, but I need protection from XYZ people. Really long-term one-on-one mentoring is about the only thing we've ever found to be able to shift a kid away from that mindset. But those are the three things that we face every day here and that all of us face in this community.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the other kind of larger systemic or community issues that you see kind of result in maybe some of the instability where youth are ending up in your programs? I'm sure you're also thinking about issues like, housing, or do your students have reliable housing at home, or access to food, the family supports, and just kind of curious what other community issues you guys see and think about at Benchmark.
Yeah. Well, it stems back to what goes on at home, and the many of the families that we work with, and we do work closely with, these parents, these guardians are so busy. They're trying to keep above water, trying to keep things afloat. while also trying to keep their children from falling victim to that, access to guns, social media, and protection loop that I talked about before. We have yet to crack any code related to how to work on housing for our students. And we all know stability at home is part of what can change your whole trajectory of life, especially if you're an 18-year-old and you've gotten in some trouble before and your guardian decides you're 18 now, it's time for you to go. And you're not prepared to live on your own. So, of course, you fall into a trap of bouncing from couch to couch, not knowing where to stay. Then you stop going to school. If you stop going to school, perhaps you get in trouble. You get in trouble, you end up in our program. A lot of what we do, a lot of what we do is just convince our kids to go back to school. How can we get you back into the classroom? The school district of Lancaster and other school districts do a fantastic job, but the kids have to be invested in being there. They have to understand that it matters to be there. And there could be 6 months of mentoring work before we get a kid to that point. So I have to just say we lean on our partners heavily to help us with issues that we see here that relate to housing, to food insecurity, to truancy, just not going to school. And then and what we can do very well is to change peer groups. It's very hard for a young person to say no to a peer group who they feel like is their family, who feel like respects them, who feel like gives them opportunity for advancement in life. Even if those are negative people, it's hard to get someone to steer away from that and find a different group of people who will help them.
In the early days of Hourglass, so I'm talking back over 20 years now, our organization was very involved in the topic of juvenile justice. This is the time when we were looking at building the new youth intervention center, and we were hosting a lot of forums trying to figure out what the needs were and how our community could best meet them. At the time, our organization was saying that we're going to build this facility that's too big because we're seeing that the trends in juvenile justice are changing. I'd love to get your perspective on that. What are some of the changes that you've seen in juvenile justice practice? Where do we kind of stand with some of those issues, and how does Benchmark fit in?
Yeah, it's a great question, Diana, and I'm glad to talk about it. We consider the Lancaster County Youth Intervention Center one of our closest partners because they allow us to come into the building and provide programming so that the kids are willing to come here afterwards. So they are struggling with what many of us are struggling with, which is just having people to work in the roles that are needed. The facility itself has seen a decrease in referrals. And that is because you asked about the trend. The trend, based off of research, is to move kids away from secure detention and back into community resources. So programs that mentor and supervise kids here in their community. Now, the detention center will always have a place because there are times when we need to remove an individual from the community. And so organizations like Benchmark should be going in there. They should be going in to connect with kids, preparing those kids to be connected in the community afterwards. So there's always a need for that. Is the building 100% utilized? I'm not sure. My perception is that it's not when I go in there, but my perception is also that it's a necessary resource. But the trend, based off of research that shows the mental health impacts of incarceration at the detention center or otherwise, the number one indicator of reoffense was someone incarcerated. It's the number one indicator of reoffense. So we as a community have picked up on that. Our judicial system has, our probation offices have. And so they are looking for resources like Benchmark. And we're not the only one. There are many other providers similar to us. But that kids need to be at home. They need to be connected in their schools with good, healthy friends, with community places like this, so that when they're done probation, which is ultimately what we want for them, they're not just left high and dry. And if they were to be placed somewhere other than home, they would come back home and say, well, now I'm back in this stuff. And they never figured out how to handle it here at home. So the biggest trend and the biggest challenge is how can we as a community operate, fund, create more mentoring programs right here at home? And that's tough because this field is not a field where there's a ton of money. There's oftentimes it has not been a ton of innovation in this field. And this field is exhausting. So those three things can be really challenging if you're going to start something like this up. And I think part of the reason why we've succeeded is because we've added new programs or changed programs every year. And I can talk about, Benchmark now being 10 years in, what are we changing now? because we're going through a lot of those changes.
Yeah, talk about
And
that. I was going to say, you've mentioned quite a bit about the need for mentorship for high risk youth. So, what are some of those kind of mentorship strategies you're looking at Benchmark?
yep. So speaking from what we've learned, myself and all of the other staff here, one-on-one mentoring, long-term one-on-one mentoring, that's the gold standard. And I think if we as a community think back on our own lives, you could probably pick out one or two really consistent, available, dedicated mentors that you had. So yes, we operate group mentoring programs here at Benchmark. But today, we've reflected back and said all our best stories, all our best outcomes are from mentors who went one-on-one with a kid and went above and beyond for some extra service. So in the programs now that we've operated as groups, we're trying to say, well, how could we take these staff and these students, have them interact one-on-one, maybe have them meet as a group once or twice a week, but have more one-on-one interaction. And that program for which we've received that ARPA funding, that's what proved to us that we could do it, because those are the highest risk youth with a one-on-one mentoring relationship that's kept them out of trouble. And we've said, now that has to be translated to every other program. So that's, I mean, when we talk about mentoring, when we talk about Benchmark, we don't talk about what evidence-based lesson did you teach those kids today? Because the kids aren't going to remember any of that. They're going to remember the mentors who said to them after the lesson, all right, do we need to pick up some groceries before you go home? Because I know you mentioned that to me last week. Is that something we need to do? Or do I need to get your driver's license? Do we need to get your permit? Is there something extra I need to talk to your teacher about? That's the thing that drives change. Not to say we don't need evidence-based practices. We do. But if that's all your program offers, if that's all you're bringing to the community table in terms of mentorship, you're selling yourself short and you're selling the kids short, because there should be much more to it than that.
Like you mentioned, it's your 10th anniversary. So, that's a big milestone for the Benchmark program. What are some of your key goals, initiatives maybe for Benchmark as you move into this your next decade, and how can people listening today in the community get involved or support your efforts?
Well, for everyone who's listening, just knowing about us is incredibly impactful, because we don't promote ourselves outside of opportunities to speak like this. We are working on a couple big things, three in which I'll point out today. Number one is the growth of what we have partnership with McCaskey and the School District of Lancaster called the Suspension Alternative Program. So when you talk to kids and you ask, what is the first time you got in trouble? Many of them can point to, I got suspended from school. So we talked to the high school, and the high school said, well, let's do something together. So now within McCaskey on the third floor of JP, Benchmark has our own 2 classrooms. And the district can send a kid who's got a suspension to us for some restorative programming, for reintegration into the classroom, for check-ins, and that kid is more likely to not do something again because they've been through just 5 short days of programming with us. So we want to see that program grow, because we think that would head off a lot of these juvenile justice issues if we can remediate them in the school building with some of our staff in partnership with the district. That's number one. Number two is that we have to bring mental health counseling in here, into the building. Because no matter how we try, the kids who oftentimes need that counseling the most are not willing to go somewhere else for it. No matter how good those providers are, they're comfortable here. They want to stay here. They want the resource here. And so we want to find a way to bring mental health counseling into Benchmark, make it free and accessible to our individuals and their families who need that. Number three, much bigger lift here. Somewhere down the road, we want to be able to have a housing solution for our 18, 19-year-olds, temporary, so that they don't end up couch surfing, so that they can have a home base connected to all the Benchmark resources, where they can leapfrog forward into a job, into their own house. We just have to fill that gap. If we can fill that gap somehow, I think we can prevent a lot of youth homelessness. And I'm speaking that as we work with a number of wonderful partner agencies. We don't want to replicate their work. We just think there may be something powerful here that we could do. So for people who want to get involved, I invite you first to come down here. Come down at night. Come see the program. Come meet me, meet the staff, meet the kids. I don't think there's a better way you could get to know us. And through that, we figure out what future engagement with us might look like.
Well, that's amazing. I really appreciate all your time today, Will. I've known about Benchmark and as a great safe space for youth in the city of Lancaster to spend time and build mentorships and skills. But actually, you're doing so much more programming right on. I'm a city resident. You're doing all this programming right under my nose that I didn't even know about. So you guys have a really bright future and kind of all the direction that you're going with your programming. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Yep. Thanks, Diana. And thanks to your whole Hourglass Lancaster community. We're lucky to be a part of what we're all doing here in Lancaster City. So thanks.
To everyone who's listening, you can get more episodes of Listening to Lancaster on our YouTube channel or on our website at hourglasslancaster.org. And we'll drop some links so you can also learn more about Benchmark and reach out and get involved with them if today's conversation inspired you. So thank you so much.